Thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate that kind introduction. I am Susan Bashinsky. I live in St. Joseph, Missouri. If those of you aren't familiar with the Midwest, I'm about an hour north of Kansas City, Missouri, so chances are you might identify with that. I work at a university. I'm a professor of special ed and a dean of our graduate school, and that's my day job, but that's not what I love. What I love is working with learners who experience deaf blindness and working with state projects to develop materials or present sessions or try to support them with technical assistance for learners who experience deaf blindness. And so I am so thrilled to have this opportunity. And I want to thank Donna Carpenter and everybody who's affiliated with the Southeast Deafblind Consortium and all of our various interpreters of all flavors today. They said, Susan, don't talk too fast. And those of you, if you've heard me present before, I already said, well, we lose because I do talk too fast and I'm going to try to slow down. So I've been teaching learners who experience deaf blindness or working with them since the 1990. So that's longer than many of you have been alive. And I've been in teaching a whole lot longer than that, probably longer than most of you have been alive. And so that's the kind way of treating myself to say, yeah, I'm old and I've done this work for a long time. So without further ado, you don't want to hear about me. You want to talk about how you as an individual can support learners who communicate primarily without the use of symbols. That is incredibly important. I will tell you right now that if you are hoping to get information from this webinar today for learners who either through speech or sign language or some app on an iPad or Proloquo to Go or TalkChat, or they use symbols very efficiently for communication, this isn't going to match. And it's not that those aren't valuable, viable means of communication. Those are very conventional and very important means of communication. It's just that's not our focus today. And so I want to tell you that right up front so that if you're not interested or you don't feel that you're in need of information of how you build a communication system for a learner who communicates primarily without using symbols, you have a better way to spend the next hour and a half, because I realize you do have a lot of choices. You have a lot of options. You're very busy people. And as Marilyn said, I want to personally thank you for joining us today and for sharing your time with me, because I really am passionate about this topic. And I think it's critically important. And hopefully in the next hour and a half, I'll maybe convince you why I think it's so important. So let's go. Donna, if you had launched the first poll for me, I would really appreciate it. I would really like to know primarily who's here. And we're limited on the number of options, which is why you may have to add other. You know, a few family people, good. Lots of teachers, lots of related service providers. And if you have another role, say you're an administrator or you're a vocational voc tech, career job coach, something, if you put that in the chat, maybe somebody would read those to me when we end the poll. Looks like we've got about 2/3 people voting. Donna, should we cut this off? It looks like the numbers aren't changing anymore. Is that reasonable? Okay.
And Susan, I'll read what's in the chat here for you. So,
okay.
Andrea Blackwood says hello, but Andrea, you know, East Carolina University, the TSP, a VR counselor, AT staff developer, education specialist for a deaf-blind project, AT specialist, deaf-blind educational consultant, university staff for communication projects, That's Jackie Kearns, yay, from University of Kentucky.
Yeah.
Vicki is retired adapted PE teacher from North Carolina, DeafBlind educational consultants, Minnie Lambert, and then the special educator for the AAC project.
Okay, thank you, Donna. I appreciate that. It really does sound like we've got the waterfront covered with individuals. I will do my best. I'm obviously not going to be able to give you all an example that is going to be right on point for your specific role, but I will try to hit on as many of those different kinds of things as I can. Because we really, in a group of 53 people, to have that variety of responsibilities represented, I think is pretty cool. So thank you for that. What will you learn today? Well, fingers crossed. These are the main things you will learn. I have put together a list. Some of you, Andrea, have heard me share this before, of what I think are 18 critical communication reminders. These are not in the PowerPoint simply because I can talk for an hour and a half about them, but it will give you a little window inside my mind. I don't know if that's where you want to be, but it will be coming to you. This handout sheet of these communication reminders will be coming to you as a handout with your certificate when you receive that at the conclusion of the webinar. And I hope those will serve as a summary of a lot of the undergirding principles that I will share with you today. The main things we're going to do together today will be, I will share with you the steps that I would suggest you and your teams follow to build non-symbolic dictionaries for a learner, but they need to be built in pairs. They need to be built as a receptive and an expressive dictionary. I will say that lots. We will talk about processes for assisting with assessment. So how you can begin to prepare for developing these non-symbolic dictionaries. And then we will do a little bit, not a lot, because we just don't have enough time, but hopefully you will feel set up to do the actual implementation of these dictionaries with a learner with whom you work. So here we go. I believe in my soul that there is absolutely not one single learner on this planet who does not communicate, all right? They do. They all do. Every single one. And notice I haven't said there is absolutely no learner who can't learn to communicate. No, that's different. They all communicate with us. We might not understand their communication style or their communication mode, but that's on us. The onus is on us to figure out what those learners who don't use conventional symbols are saying to us. It's not on them, it's on us. We've got to figure it out. One of my favorite books, and if you work in the field, as many of you wrote, your AAC consultants, your AT consultants, your support people. If you haven't read the book Ghost Boy, I truly encourage you to read it. This is a quote from him. Martin Pistorius, not having a voice to say I'd had enough food, or that the bathwater was too hot, or to tell someone I loved them, was the thing that made me feel most inhuman. Words and speech give us free will. Without a voice, I couldn't control even the simplest things. And this is a quote from his book, which is an autobiography of the early part of his life. And the dictionaries that I will be sharing with you today will, I hope, give you a format that maybe you haven't used before to try to structure and make predictable ways in which learners who don't use conventional symbols are communicating and are having a voice, not a speech voice, but a way that we can predict and anticipate and interpret so that we can give them this power to help them feel respected and dignified and recognize their humanity. How do we define communication? I think it occurs when one individual sends a message to another individual. And as I said, these learners do this with us all the time. But this last part is very important. And that message is received and understood. So when the kiddo is pulling on your pants leg, or the kid is spitting in your face, or the kid is pounding on the table, or the kid is eloping out of the classroom, they're sending messages to us, but maybe we're not receiving and understanding those messages. Those are the kind of signals about which we're going to be talking for the rest of our time today. Communication does occur long before formal language, conventional language is developed. And so what we're going to be focusing on today together is body movement, vocalization, grunts, cries, squeals, squeaks, objects, gestures. I think we can't underestimate. That's wrong. I said that wrong. We cannot overestimate the importance of gestures. So all those things are how we're going to build a foundation for communication exchange between us and those learners who communicate without the use of symbols. I think there are two primary ways that we can interpret or view the overt behaviors that our learners who experience deafblindness show us. If it's an OT session, a speech session, an adaptive PE session, whatever it is, there are two things. We can use a behavior filter. We can use, or challenging behavior filter possibly. We can use a communication filter. So let's say, for example, that you are helping assist a young learner to do some oral feeding. Maybe it's a learner who's tube fed that you're trying to do some desensitization and start to get that learner to be able to take a few things by mouth. Maybe it's a kiddo who does get full nutrition by mouth, but because of physical challenges can't feed himself. So you're trying to help this learner get food inside his body. And all of a sudden, you glance away or you don't glance away, and the kid pushes the food off the table, off the wheelchair tray, off the high chair if you're working with a toddler, and it goes all over the floor. All right? I think many of us can identify with this scenario. I can. Been there, done that, right? Okay? If you throw up the behavior filter and you look through that behavior filter and you've seen that learner throw all the food on the floor, you go, okay, you're done. That's enough. Take the tray away. You can't, that's an inappropriate behavior. And I don't know what we say. I don't know what you say. I hope you don't say anything like this, but it's like, you're finished. You can't have any more food. Don't throw your food on the floor. Throw your food on the floor. It's a negative interpretation, right? Because you're looking at this through what is the learner's behavior, and you just see pieces and parts, but it's all negative because the food isn't supposed to get thrown all over the floor. So that's a challenging behavior. We're going to write a behavior intervention plan. We're going to do all this nonsense. When I don't think so. Let's throw up a communication filter. Let's put up the communication filter and let's look through the communication filter and go, oh, wow. Nate, he's got this pureed stuff that looks like junk and it's cold. And maybe he's trying to say, it tastes terrible. Can you feed me something else? Maybe he's trying to say, I don't feel well. I don't feel good. My tummy hurts. If I eat, I'm going to throw up all over you. But of course, these learners don't say these things to us because they don't have the manual sign skills. They don't have the skills to use symbolic AAC. They don't have the speech. They're showing us with their behavior. This is too hot. This is too cold. This tastes crummy. I don't feel well. Maybe they're saying, oh, Susan, it's you feeding me again. I don't want you feeding me. I want Erna to feed me. Maybe they're saying, you've got me sitting over here in the corner all by myself. I want to go sit over at the table with my friends. The possible meanings are endless. And so the processes that I'm going to share with you today, I hope, will help your team narrow these so that you are all interpreting that possible meaning the same way, that's based on a foundation of more than just pulling guesses out of the air. All right. But I hope you see the difference. If you look through a behavior filter and you interpret what your learners do through that behavior filter all the time, we're not going to get where we need to be in terms of building a foundation for communication exchange. Throw up the communication filter. Oh, Don, I said I wasn't going to say that. Put up the communication filter and look and say, what could it mean? Why did he throw his food on the floor? Why did he spit in my face? Why did he hit the kiddo sitting next to him? Why did she run away? Why did she keep hitting herself in the head? We have to ask those questions, because those things are what I call, and I hope you will call, non-symbolic behavioral signals that could be converted through shaping and scaffolding. Those things could be converted into meaningful communicative behaviors that over time then can bridge that learner to symbolic communication. And over time, if we assign predictable meaning and anticipate consequences that a learner can anticipate, and everybody on the team does the same thing the same way every time the kid spits in their face, because they think it means I'm hurting right now, we can bridge that learner into a more symbolic, more conventional form of communication. So they're not going to spit in our face or run out of the room or hit themselves or hit somebody else or throw the food on the floor. And the way we start is we observe the learner, especially during unstructured time, free time, if you want to call it free time, and we follow the kids' leads. And things that we think are potentially, whoops, that was a mistake, potentially communicative signals, we need to grab them and embellish them and reinforce them from, if we want to use that behavioral terminology. And sometimes with kiddos who have really no organization to their communication when we begin intervention, we have to directly teach even those non-symbolic communication skills. If I wanted to summarize this whole hour and a half, so this is the whole thing. If you don't have an hour and a half after this slide, you can take off and do what you need to do. Communicative intervention for learners who communicate primarily without the use of symbols means, please, listen to them, but don't listen just with your ears. Listen with your eyes, listen with your hands, listen with your heart, right? And talk with more than your mouth. If you're working with a learner who signs, talk with more than manual signs. And that's it. So let's talk about how we do that. I think we need to begin with a review of how the ability to understand symbols does emerge in learners who are typically developing. Do we have any questions at this point, Donna, that seem essential before I launch into this symbolization ability section?
Nope, you're good to go, Susan.
Okay, we're going to rock on. Thank you. So my interpretation of this ability to understand symbols is the ability to understand that one thing represents or stands for another thing. All right. It might be a spoken word. It might be a manual sign. It might be an object. It might be a certain type of touch. It might be a tactile sign. It might be a gesture. It might be a body movement. It might be an eye movement. That's why I said thing. It's going to be unique to the learner with whom you're developing the program. All right. But it's the idea that they have to be able to get it, that one thing can stand for another thing. The sign, the finger spelling, CAT can stand for cat. The sign can stand for cat. A picture of a black cat can stand for cat. My saying cat can stand for cat. My saying ki can stand for cat. Lots of things can stand for cat. And there are two things that are really important. We talk about the referent, which in the example I just gave you is the cat. It's that thing we're going to represent, and the representation itself. And that's where kids who don't have conventional communication really break down, because that involves understanding symbols. Okay, so we have to deal with that. So if you remember, I think somebody on the list has a background in school psychology or some kind of psychology. And we all have learned about Piaget somewhere along the way in our careers. His perspective is that the key to this whole ability to understand symbols is in the notion of representational thinking. It's the ability to represent something in our mind when it is not present right here in the space I'm in, or for you right there in the space you're in, and right now in this time that we're sharing together. Like if I said to you, what's on the counter in your kitchen? All right. My guess is that many of you are not in your kitchens right now. If you're in your kitchen, the example doesn't work. Okay. But you could do that, because you could call up in your brain what's in your kitchen, even though you're not in that space right now. Okay. And if I said, what happened? Where were you? The last winter holiday that you celebrated. You know, what did you do on the last holiday? If it was Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, what did you do? And you could all do that because you're capable of symbolic thinking and representational thinking. But that involves the ability to distance ourselves from the right here, right now, in space and time. And that takes development. In the professional literature, you'll see all these forewords to mean the same thing, to reference the same thing that I'm talking about today. Pre-linguistic, non-linguistic, pre-symbolic, non-symbolic. In my mind, when you read the professional literature, these four terms are used interchangeably. I will, unless somebody tells me I can't, I always choose to say non-symbolic. I like that one better. I don't like pre, because in my head, pre indicates that whatever the next stage is, in other words, symbolic communication, will definitely follow. And for many, many, many of the learners with deaf blindness whom you teach, it will. Maybe not at 2 years of age, like with kids who are typically developing. Maybe it'll be when they're 6. Maybe it'll be when they're 12 years old. But for many of the learners with deaf blindness whom we teach, they might never move past a non-symbolic stage of communication development for the bolus of their communication. And that's okay. That's legitimate. It's real. We just need to structure it for them. Different authors, different researchers will talk about, oh, there's 6 stages of communication development of symbolic ability. No, there's 7 stages of symbolic ability. In the communication matrix, Charity Rowland and her colleagues have 7 different levels. There's nothing to say there's a definitive number of levels of symbolic communication development that is absolutely correct. And I follow the keep it simple, stupid principle, and I talk about 3. I like to talk about 3 stages. I say there's a non-symbolic stage. There's a transitional stage where a learner is really bridging over and beginning to understand some concrete symbols. And then there's the full-blown abstract symbolic communication. 1, 2, 3. Keep it simple. So this is a summary, and you'll find this in the PowerPoint you'll be receiving. We're not going to take it apart together right now, but this is how I depict this whole continuum of symbolization development. It goes from left to right, and you move through overall non-symbolic through transitional to fully abstract symbolic communication. All right. But there's several things about this, and we're going to examine each of these stages individually. But I think these, for now, these 3 points at the bottom are what I want you to focus on with me right now. And then you can look, I think this is slide 15 when you get your PowerPoint. As learners move across this continuum of symbolization development, how important the context is to a successful communicative interaction diminishes. Context is less and less important, right? Because we are fully symbolic. We can talk with one another about anything in any place without having a lot of context. If you're having a conversation with a friend or a colleague and they switch topics on you really quickly, right? You might say, whoa, wait, take me with you. What are you talking about? So you need somebody to set a little bit of context, but it's lesser important. When we're talking about kids who are not symbolic, they don't use conventional symbols at all. We need the context of why Billy Bob beats on top of the TV in his living room. It's like, what? We need more information, right? And when you're filled in on the information that it's when he's in there and his big brother's in there and the TV is on and they've been watching a show on a Tuesday night, and then after that show's over, Billy Bob wants his brother to change the channel. He beats on the TV to say, change the channel for me, will you, bro? But if we don't have that context, we would not have a successful communicative interaction. So context is so important at this end of the continuum. Similarly, how important a partner is super critical at these early stages of communication development and becomes less important as you move down the continuum, right? Because again, we can talk to almost anybody in our native language if we are conventional, proficient communicators. And as the last point makes, conventionality increases as you move down the continuum. So let's take these apart, all right? I think this is a summary of what is most important about this figure that I've given you. At any given point in time, an individual learner will demonstrate some skills or is likely to demonstrate some skills at multiple points along that continuum, all right? They're not going to have every skill only in the non-symbolic column. There might be 2 or 3 in the middle column because of the second point. With familiar partners, learners use communication differently than they do with unfamiliar partners. Or they might do the same gesture, the same body movement, Billy Bob beating on the TV as a gesture, but familiar partners understand that. And if I walked into that family's living room and observed that behavior as an unfamiliar partner, I wouldn't have a clue what it meant. So there are things that are in different places also. And I hope I don't offend anybody when I say this, but sometimes we do it with manual sign, tactile sign, I think more so than speech, because we can't reach our hands down a learner's throat and manipulate their vocal cords. But we can, with ABA training and reinforcement, we can teach kids to sign more because we can physically assist it and get them to sign more. So they might use a sign for more. And they might even use it appropriately because it's been reinforced enough. Well, using the sign more is a very symbolic behavior, but it's been trained. It's been trained as a splinter skill that's way down here on the far end of symbolization development. But it's an isolated. Maybe you've even taught 3 signs, but they're 3 isolated skills, and you haven't built a foundation for future communication and language development, because kids do demonstrate different skills with familiar and unfamiliar partners. They demonstrate different skills in familiar and unfamiliar environments. These levels of symbolization that I'm just choosing to call non-symbolic, transitional, and symbolic, they are not differentiated by distinct boundaries. Like I say, they kind of just overlap. It's real squishy. If you want things to exist in silos, I would say give up. It's not going to happen in terms of the development of symbolic ability. And a shift from one level to the next level doesn't occur overnight. It's not that a learner will go to bed one night and have primarily non-symbolic skills and wake up the next day and boom, she's demonstrating a lot of concrete, symbolic, or transitional communication skills. The development of symbolization ability kind of goes up and back and up and back and up and back and up and back and up and back. It doesn't move in a singular direction that's always improving. It's that whole 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, as kids learn and they expand their communication repertoire of non-symbolic signals to more partners in more environments at more times of day. So it doesn't happen in one direction. And the way we talk about a learner's communication skills is by that column, if you will, on the chart that describes or that matches, corresponds with the majority of an individual learner's symbolization abilities. So let's take these three stages apart, okay? At the non-symbolic level, and this is what's summarized on the chart. The signals are very idiosyncratic. They're unique to the learner, like beating on the TV, like engaging in a self-stim behavior and stereotypy, like a certain motion that pounding on your arm or pulling on your pants leg, or making a certain squeal or a squeaky sound or a laugh, a different kind of a laugh. It's like those of you who are parents or have taken care of very young children, over time you learn to differentiate the meaning of a young child's cries. Or if it's a learner with deafblindness who is not symbolic, you learn to differentiate what certain types of cries or sounds mean. That is this second point. Those cries are idiosyncratic to the learner, and for the communication to be successful, the responsibility is on you as the partner. You have to interpret it correctly. Context is critical, all right? And examples of these forms of non-symbolic forms: crying, body posturing, acting on people or objects, if it's throwing them, hitting them, mouthing them, using unconventional gestures, vocalizing in the different ways that I've been illustrating, okay? Hopefully this makes sense. The middle stage, transitional. Some of the expressive signals a learner uses start to become more conventional. The partner is still really important, but less so, all right? Less so. The signals like gestures, if kids wave, it's not truly symbolic, but it's kind of concrete, or especially if somebody's helping them wave with a hand under hand or helping them wave, it's a movement toward conventionality, all right? And so the partner's still important, but in our culture and in our society, you have a good guess that either means hello or goodbye, right? Context is still important, but not as important. This is when you can begin to have an introduction of some three-dimensional objects, tangible symbols, if you're familiar with Roland and Schweigert's work on tangible symbol systems. And examples of transitional forms are, this really should say, more conventional gestures instead of idiosyncratic gestures. Some use of object representations, some photographs, maybe a photograph of the learner herself if the vision is sufficient to see that. But I think from these examples, I hope from these examples, you see that things are beginning to look like or sound like, or a tactile sign feel like, what is more traditional or more conventional. In the symbolic stage, we really don't need to talk about so much because that's how we communicate with one another, right? These are our conventional expressions, consistent with the learner's culture and with consideration of the primary language of the home, the primary language in the classroom. And this is a point at which, I would be remiss if I didn't say, stop, take a break, pause, think about it. When you are going to be developing, proposing non-symbolic gestures, body movements, eye movements, those kinds of things that you want to try to shape into communication signals for a learner, at that level even, it is critical that you as a team be aware of and sensitive to culture. Culture is very powerful. Culture and language communication are intimately related. And you know, in some cultures, it's not appropriate for learners to make eye contact with an authority figure. Maybe it's not appropriate for a learner to touch an adult male authority figure. There are just certain things that are not appropriate in that learner's culture. So even at the non-symbolic level, we have to be sensitive to culture and the primary culture in the home. And as we saw from the figure on slide 15, the partner's role continues to diminish. Communication can occur free of context. And examples of symbolic forms, all of you could write these. You don't need me to write them. Speech, braille, print, manual sign language, tactile sign language, written words, all of the different types of symbol sticks, PCS, board maker, all those kinds of things. Okay? So there is a chart, and I think that looking at this right now, we're not going to read it together. I've tried to summarize for you all the things that I've said to this point in time, and particularly about the major stages, the non-symbolic, transitional, symbolic. I need to move something because I can't see and I can't make this work. I'm sorry. The thing that I haven't put on the previous slides, and this makes me really nervous to put this here, but I have tried to add some rough age estimations. Piaget would be turning over in his grave if he saw me doing this right now, knew I was doing this right now. These are the ages at which kids who are so-called typically developing in their communication and language skills, that's when these stages typically emerge, all right? These are not absolutes. But when I'm talking about non-symbolic, I'm really talking early, folks, birth through 8 or 9 months. Then you get into this transitional, which is super short. It could be as short as 9 to 12 months. At the outside, it's 8 to 15. When the first true words emerge for you speech and language pathologists. And then symbolic is what we do for the rest of our lives in our native language. Even we resort to less conventional forms if we are in a foreign country and we don't speak the language in the foreign country and they don't speak English, and you get lost from your tour group and you've lost your dictionary and somebody stole your purse and it's getting dark. At that point, I'd be sitting on the curb in Berlin and crying, which is very non-symbolic, but I'm lost. I have no way to communicate. Now, that's probably not a good example because so many folks in Germany do speak English. So just go with me on that if you would. But we all, in different ways, like when I see my very best friend that now I maybe haven't seen since a year ago, March, I'm not going to be formal and symbolic and walk up to her and say, and shake her hand and say, well, hello, Sue. It's so great to see you. I've missed you so much. Nuh-uh. I'm going to run up to her and shriek and yell and hug her because that's what we do. So we all use all these forms, but we are described as symbolic communicators because that's the bolus of how we communicate with one another. All right? I think it's really important that as we work with learners who communicate without the use of symbols, that we're going to do everything we can to facilitate their development of symbolization or symbolic communication ability. All right? We need to try to shape and scaffold and facilitate the learner's growth across that continuum. And the way we do that, I could have made a list longer than these 6 points, but these are the 6 that, in my opinion, are the most important. We want to build experiences into that learner's day. If it's in school, if it's in a general ed classroom, if it's in a gym, if it's in a therapy session, if it's on a job site, wherever you are, you want to try to build in experiences that involve movement. One of the communication reminders that you'll get from me is earliest expression of memories is demonstrated through body movement. The learner's earliest expression of memories is through his or her body movement. And action. It's how we get kids engaged, right? Actively engaging the learners in the experiences we provide, movement and action. We need multi-sensory experiences, including touch. And not only for those kids who need tactile sign, we want touch involved. Kids understand touch, different types of touch, different locations of touch, long before they understand words, spoken words, manual signs. We want to use objects, activities that are preferred by the learner. We need to involve observation, right? And gather information about that learner's preferences, that learner's interests. If that kiddo, that young kiddo is into trains, we want to build trains into what we do. If it's a young adult who absolutely loves a certain TV show, we want to build in that TV show. If they absolutely love a certain para, then we want to try to involve that para, not in all the teaching or the intervener, not in all of the teaching experiences, but maybe we're going to do a lesson about her birthday or what she likes, or let's build a surprise for that particular intervener. We want to involve interactions that occur during play. We want to build in regular routines. And the reason this is in purple, again, those of you who know me, I use colors. Sorry, I need to do it for myself. At the non-symbolic stage, kids who do not use symbols to communicate, they have to have highly responsive adults. You have to be in there and be attuned to them in the moment. Be present. Don't be talking to the adult that's sitting over here when you're feeding Sarah. Because if you're feeding Sarah and you look over here, maybe when you put the spoon to Sarah's mouth, she does this. But by the time you've turned back from visiting with the other person, you missed it. Be in the moment. Be highly responsive to the learner. There's one other way that we can, and then we're going to have to see if there are questions, that we can talk about this notion of representation, what kinds of representations we can use. And there are vocal things, okay? We talked about shrieks, cries, speaking, up into like conventional sounds like that's more transitional, to very symbolic, yes, no, in all of our speech or manual sign. Unaided things, I have very sophisticated definitions for aided and unaided. Unaided involves only the learner's body, okay? Nothing's going to aid the learner's expression other than her facial expression, her eyes, her hands, her body movement, her posture, her running away. Doesn't involve other things. Aided involves other stuff. Very sophisticated, right? Stuff, pictures, objects, handling, moving other people. You're another stuff because you're outside the learner's body. And once again, I've summarized this stuff with a few examples. Stuff, that was bad, Susan. Vocal, unaided, and aided. And I've tried to give you some examples of what each of those looks like at these primary stages that we've been talking about for the last 20, 25 minutes. Okay? So with that, I'll leave this chart up. Donna, do you have any questions for me at this point?
Hi, Susan. This is Donna. There's just one comment from Jennifer Starks. She suggested the book Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper is a good, easy reading novel. Her 5th grade is reading it as part of his class assignment, and it gives insight to some of these communication difficulties and frustrations, and it gives you the learner's perspective.
Yeah, love it. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for keeping me honest. I can't mention everything, so thank you for that. It's great.
You're good. Go on.
Move on. All right. So what strategies? You want strategies, right? Okay, let's get some strategies going. There is this model, and everything that I'm going to talk about comes out of this model. And Ellen Siegel and I came up with this, what now seems like an eternity ago. It's like 24 years ago. But it's this idea that this framework supported our field. And by that, I mean the field of special education, field of speech and language pathology, the field of deafblindness, to move beyond just assessment and intervention that focuses on one learner. We can't focus only on the learner, or we're missing two of three very, very critical, important elements. We have to look at the learner and the learner's overt behavior. And remember what we talked about. You can throw up a behavior filter, and I am begging you to please not do that. Or you can throw up a communication filter. All right. I will say sometimes behavior is just challenging behavior and we can't figure out a meaning. All right. I'm not saying that there's never a need for a behavior intervention plan. Please don't leave this webinar saying, well, Bashinsky said we should never write intervention plans for behavior. I'm not saying that. But please try to find some meaning through a communication filter. Partner skills, everything from here on out. I'm going to talk about what you as communication partners need to do and ways in which we set up the communication environment or the communication context. So the first strategy, the TriFocus framework actually includes 5. We're going to talk about 2. The first one is enhancing sensitivity. All right. So the way that I would define this for you is being aware of and receptive to the subtle cues of a learner who experiences deafblindness or multiple disabilities or doesn't communicate with symbols, all right? Now, sometimes in my haste, I give these dramatic examples, all right, about throwing, spitting, running, and those are signals that potentially can be communicative. But also, it's like the example I gave when I said you've got to be in the moment. And when you're giving Sarah a bite of food and she turns her head, you can miss that. If when you're trying to do something in a PT session and the learner grimaces, pay attention. It could be that when a certain friend in a general ed class walks by, Christopher kicks his right foot. He always kicks his right foot because he has better control, muscle control over his right leg. And he's saying, come over here. I like you. I want you to be my friend. Come talk to me. It's subtle things as well as these dramatic examples that I've been giving. And if we, as partners, will consistently respond to those potential signals, every single person responds the exact same way, home, school, everybody says the same thing, everybody does the same thing, bang, bang. It's going to facilitate growth down that continuum of symbolization development. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen after we do this for 3 signals. It potentially could take months. It potentially could take years. And as we said, some learners will never transition to symbolic, and that's okay. But at least we need to organize the non-symbolic things they do for them out of respect, to honor their dignity, and to give them some influence over their own worlds. So when I'm talking about enhancing sensitivity, I'm talking about changing I won't just say you, I'll say our behavior as communication partners for these learners. And what I would suggest we need to watch for, again, there's not a finite list. I've chosen 6 things that I think are particularly important. Attention, and we're going to talk about each of these. Attention shift, a reluctance to initiate behavior, signal persistence, change in the form of a behavior or change in the quality of a behavior. For speech language pathologists, you call it recasting. Termination of a behavior, like once a change got made, once you repositioned a kid and finally that's what he was trying to get you to do because he was feeling pressure, uncomfortable pressure, so the behavior stopped, or a display of satisfaction. So let's take these apart. The first one is attention shift, all right? It's the alternation of attention between the communication partner and the goal, all right? So maybe there's a cup, and this wouldn't be this close to the learner's face, but I want it in the camera. Let's say this cup is on a table in front of a learner, and the learner has sufficient vision to see it. So the learner looks at you, and the learner looks at the cup, and the learner looks at you, and the learner looks at the cup, and the learner looks at you, and the learner looks at the cup. What's the learner saying? One of a handful of things, right? Like, would you please give me a drink? I'm thirsty. I want a drink. If the cup is empty, maybe it's, can I have some more juice, please? Will you help me? But it's something about this cup. Now, that's a visual example. You can also see alternation of attention without vision for those learners who have only light vision, or those few learners who are completely without vision, completely blind. But you can see it, right? If they hear a sound over here and they orient over here, and then they hear something and then they orient over here, or they know you're over here because you've signaled them manually through touch that you're over here, but they hear kids walking up and down the hallway, or they hear kids going out to recess if you have an exterior wall. So they're orienting to you, then they're orienting to the noise they hear. They're orienting to you, they're orienting to the noise they hear. That's an attention shift as well. All right. And that's why in the literature, you will see this listed gaze shift. I don't have any problem with gaze shift other than the fact it's too limiting, because some of our kids don't have enough functional vision to gaze shift, right? They're going to have to rely on shifting by body posture, or shifting. Kids who do manual search, right? They're going to shift from you to over here. They're going to tell you, I don't want this, I want this. So there's ways they show you this shift, all right? And that is a really rich, fertile ground. Grab that signal. It's potentially communicative. I think it is communicative. We just need to assign a meaning to it and get everybody to respond to it the same way. It's sort of like they're saying, you dummy, I've been telling you this. Why don't you respond to me? So we need to organize it, and we need to systematize it for that learner's sake. A second one is reluctance to initiate. Sometimes this could be displayed as a resistance to prompting. Kids will pull back, right? And part of it, I think, is we need to allow our learners who experience deaf blindness to have a range of personality traits. I'm not sure we do that. I will tell you, I think when I was a classroom teacher at first, I didn't do this. I think I really stunk at it, okay? And I guess the best way I can drive this point home, and because again, we could have I think a pretty interesting theoretical conversation about this, but time doesn't allow it. I would ask you to think of what I've posed down here. Think of the folks who are in your own circle of friends, all right? And what differences do you notice that might be related to this aspect? You know, when you all, if we ever can all go out together again to eat or to have something to drink or to go to a movie, there are going to be certain of your friends that are always going to be the one to make a first suggestion, right? And there are going to be others that are always going to say, I don't care, whatever you decide, I don't care. And there's going to be somebody possibly who's never going to speak up at all. As a teacher at the university, there are those students who always have their hands up to answer every question, to the point that sometimes the other learners in the class that I can see are all rolling their eyes when this person starts talking, right? You can remember some of those people. So we, as the so-called typical folks, I don't know what that means, we show a wide range of choosing to initiate a conversation, an interaction, a behavior, making a choice. Why don't we allow kids that? I don't think we do. And so maybe that reluctance is saying, I'm not comfortable. I don't, we're offering a choice and they're going, Maybe we need to respect them as saying, I don't know what to do, or I don't care, or I'm not comfortable. I don't feel like telling you this right now. Again, the meaning is however you translate that observable behavior. Whoops, sorry. 3, signal persistence. Again, I would suggest that we as partners need to pay attention. That if a kid is going to tug on your shirt and tug 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 and tug, it's very likely it means something. It might mean, will you help me? It might mean, will you go away? It might mean, will you come over here to the refrigerator with me? It could mean, again, the world is an oyster of what it could mean. And you might say, could it mean, will you go away? Well, if the learner doesn't have a sign or doesn't have the words to say, get out of my space, maybe they're doing this because they can't even push you away. If that signal persists until the partner changes something, that signal likely needs a meaning assigned to it. A fourth one, change in the form or the quality of a behavior. The form might change multiple times. It might be a change in how fast or the rate of the behavior, the intensity, the body part that's involved, how much movement is involved. I think some of you, this is when you're going to be glad you're not in a room with me, because if you were in the front row, you'd be my guinea pig. Maybe a learner would wheel over or walk over and poke, all right? And like, that's not getting a response from you. So maybe then they're going to start doing this or pulling on your clothes, and that's not getting a response from you. So maybe they're going to start hitting you harder, all right? Or maybe they're going to start poking you faster. Or maybe if that doesn't work, then they're going to start abusing themselves. All these different things is somehow the form or the quality of the behavior that you see, feel, hear. It can also be with vocal things, screaming. Maybe they're just to the point they're screaming at the top of their lungs. That's a change in the form of the behavior, called signal recasting in the literature. That means, folks, we as partners aren't doing our thing the way we need to do it. We need to pay attention and assign meaning. When a behavior stops, the learner finally stops this tugging, this screaming, we need to recognize termination as a signal when it occurs contingently to that learner receiving what she wanted. You as a partner have delivered, so that screaming, touching, yelling, spitting, whatever it is, stops. Then you know, right on, baby, I got the meaning right, all right? It can also be evidence of learned helplessness. Those of us in SPED have learned a lot about learned helplessness, and we just need to be cautious of that, be conscious of that. Finally, a display of dissatisfaction, as well as a display of satisfaction. The key again is contingency to you as a partner doing something, giving something, delivering something. It's similar to the last one we talked about with termination, but it's kind of extended because there's an addition of emotion. It's like when you finally move the kid out of the position that she has been so uncomfortable in, you might see a change in muscle tone and she might go, oh. Or maybe when you finally give her a drink after you've been giving her, assisting her to have 5, 10 bites of food, you give her a drink and she smiles because like, thank you, I was so thirsty, right? All of these things. And you might be very frustrated with me right now because you're saying, well, what is the meaning? And I'm going to say to you, I can't tell you, but I can try to give you a suggestion how to figure it out. And here's what you're going to do, I hope. You're going to build a non-symbolic signal dictionary. And these are the parts. Every time the learner does a certain thing, everybody on the team is going to say it means this. Everybody's going to do this, and everybody's going to say this. All right? And here's an example. All right? Here's an example of what this might look like. Every time that Susan is in her wheelchair and she kicks her legs frontwards and backwards really hard, everybody who is on Susan's team is going to interpret that to mean, get me out of this chair. I want out of this chair. All right? So the partner is going to, every partner, mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, everybody on the team, they're going to approach Susan from the front, not from the side. They're going to directly approach her from the front. Maybe that's because that's her field of vision, and begin to unfasten her safety belt for the chair. And they're going to say, you want out. You want to stand up. All right. Everybody's going to say the same thing. And you might say, how can we get everybody to say the same thing? You write it down. This is the dictionary. This is what you're going to make. I want to give you an example about that in a minute. And how Susan's partners will shape that into more conventional form. While they're saying this, after they've approached her and unfastened the belt, they're going to provide touch cues to both elbows, moving them upward. And hopefully that will begin to shape when you approach Susan and she wants out of her chair. It's more conventional for her to lift her own arms upward than for her to just kick her legs back and forth so violently she's bruising her shins or her heels on the wheelchair, right? And you might say, does this matter? What you say, you want out, you want to stand up. Yes, because at non-symbolic levels of communication development, learners understand tone of voice and touch. They don't understand the words. We want them to, but they don't, all right? They understand tone of voice. They understand touch. That's why the touching is so critical, and the words need to be abbreviated. I call it verbal diarrhea. Maybe some of you have experienced this when you say, okay, Susan, we're going to get you out of your chair now. You ready? I'm going to unfasten your belt and I'm going to pick you up. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, here we go. Up. Let's walk over to the changing table. We're going to go over to the changing table. Here's your diaper. You hold on to the diaper. Let's hold on to the diaper, and I'm going to lift up your hips. You ready? We're going to pull that. You got the idea. Don't do that. Please don't do that, because those words don't mean anything to a learner who communicates without the use of symbols. Please also don't leave today saying, well, Susan said don't talk or don't sign. Again, it's the same thing with sign. I just don't say it every time because I'm running out of time. Don't choose your words, keep them short, keep them like telegraphic speech, and use the same thing and emphasize the important things. One more example. If the learner hits her own left shoulder or chest, it means no, I don't want it. If the request is an optional request, like it's not something that has to be done, go away and say, or move away somewhat and say or sign, you want something else. All right. If the request is not optional, like it's not optional, you got to get on the bus to go home, or you've got to take your medication. It's not optional. Take a break for 10 seconds. And say, take a break, and then you repeat it. And you're going to prompt the learner to shape it into more conventional form, to push her arm to the side of her body as if she's pushing something away. Even if there's not something there to push away, that's the prompt, all right? And so in the example slide, you're going to have this whole thing. We just need to move on to the second strategy, but you're going to build this dictionary like this. And here's how you do it. I thought if we had time, we'd do this one together, but we don't. There's 7 steps for how you build a dictionary. You observe that learner. I had said before, especially during unstructured times, you observe that learner in a variety of activities and with a variety of partners. You create a list of potential signals by identifying those movements that the learner controls. Don't identify reflexive movements. No, no, no. The learner has to control that movement. It has to be volitional, or the sound, it has to be volitional. And then you're going to look at that list to find any patterns. What are the patterns? And if you see that Susan kicks her legs a lot, Susan beats on her chest a lot, that's where these things that appear in this column come from. They're the things that we observe most frequently, or the patterns we observe in this list that we've made through observation. Then you're going to select a few of these as core signals, and you're going to put down the meaning, just like on the example dictionary. You're going to determine the corresponding partner behavior, what they're going to say, what they're going to do, just like on the example behavior. And then you're going to stress to every single partner that you can the importance of the need to respond consistently and immediately. It's very, very, very important. All right. Now, some of you will say, well, how many signals should go on the dictionary? And I will say to you, I don't know. 2 is not enough. 20 is too many. So let's say, for example, you got a team of 4 people, okay, that are going to build this dictionary. And this person can remember 4 things reliably. What I'm supposed to say, what I'm supposed to do, 4 things. This person can remember 6. This person can remember 5. This person can remember 9. All right. In that instance, you need to put 4 because you need to go to the lowest number that any member on the team can remember, because the criticality is all partners need to respond exactly the same way and immediately. So whatever the lowest number of the team members that can remember, this person could remember 4. For your initial dictionary, you put 4. All right. And you're going to have these steps. So we're going to move on. Why do I think this is so critically important? If we as partners repeatedly interpret things that kids might not do intentionally, they just do them. All right. Their behavior might be intentional, but they might not be using it for a communicative purpose. They're signaling. If we repeatedly interpret them the same way, we might shape that intentionality. And the learner's going to begin to see she can impact her environment. She's going to begin to gain some control. She's going to figure out the world can be more organized than I thought. It's not all this unpredictable stuff that comes at me from 20 different directions, right? And the learner begins to experience the power of communication. The power of communication. And I also think I can't underestimate, I believe that this acknowledgement by partners just shows respect for the learner's dignity. All right. Donna, I know I skipped one poll, but if you want to launch the second poll, pardon me, the third one, the one I had poll number 3.
All right.
That
and
one?
is that the one on learner behaviors?
Yeah. The one that says, sorry.
Which of the following overt learner behaviors?
Yes. Sorry.
All right. Here you go, Susan.
So which of the following overt learner behaviors might be interpreted as a communication signal, might be appropriately interpreted as a communication signal? Choose all that apply. Not the who, but all that apply. Is there persistence of a signal, recasting, shifting attention, displaying satisfaction or dissatisfaction? Votes are coming in, 37%. Thank you all. We'll give it another couple seconds and then we'll spend our last 20 minutes talking about the second dictionary. Okay, we've made it to almost 50%. And the correct answer to this particular poll was yes. All 4 of those things can legitimately and appropriately be interpreted as a communication signal. Again, it's going to depend on context, but all of them. And the lowest rate we had was 77%. So you guys got it. You knocked it out of the park. So thank you for that. I do appreciate your responses. I have some information about how collaborating with PTs, OTs, how we can increase consistency of response really will help us to enhance sensitivity and help you develop meaningful, expressive, non-symbolic dictionaries. The bottom line is whatever the learner's message, you're going to accept it. You're going to respond to it in a meaningful way. And you are going to be listening with your eyes and your hands and your heart and not just listening with your ears. Okay? So thank you for your attention. I want to focus on the second half of this equation because I believe in my soul that if all we do is develop an expressive dictionary, we're going to fall flat on our faces eventually. Maybe we won't fall flat on our faces immediately, but we will, because all of us know that as every human being, no, I guess I can't say almost every human being, our understanding, our receptive vocabulary is much, much larger than our expressive vocabulary is in sign and speech and whatever it is. We understand more. When we read books, we understand whole lots of words that we don't use in our everyday communication. And as we were preparing and checking out the technology today, somebody used the word comrade, and I went, wow, I read that word and I know its meaning, but I don't use it in my vocabulary. And that's great. But I believe, and I don't have research on this, but I believe this is why it's related to why so many AUG-COM devices have been historically abandoned. Is when we first started using, we've learned a lot, okay? But when we first started using augmentative communication with learners who experience deaf blindness or other disabilities, all we did was focus on them using those devices for expression. And that's important, but you got to close the loop. A learner has to express, and then the partner has to express, and the learner has to understand so he can express again, because we have to take turns with each other. So this second dictionary is how you build comprehension, how you build the learner's receptive understanding of communication. So it involves enhancing meaning and facilitating retention by pairing verbal input, signed input with alternative forms. Learners who express in forms other than speech have fewer receptive opportunities. And I think this applies also to learners who primarily use manual sign. They have, even at a symbolic level, they have fewer opportunities to receive communication in manual sign because not everybody in a native population understands manual sign or uses it. Kids need models of their communication and how their partners use these non-symbolic forms that we are trying to teach them how to use. So we're going to pair up our speech, our sign, our gestures. We're going to pair all those things up to make sure the learner has experience to support her understanding of others' communication and support her comprehension. So what partners need to do is partners need to observe and match input. If you're going to use object cues, touch cues, other kind of cues, movements, textures, they have to match the learner's abilities. If you have a learner who has no sensation from mid-chest down, you don't want to provide touch cues on the lower part of her body. And you might be saying, duh, but think about it. We have to provide input that will be received and not in a defensive way. If you have a learner who shows extreme defensiveness to tactile stimuli, you may not want to use a lot of touch. You may want to go with other types of input. Similarly, we need to match feedback to the learner's abilities. If you have a learner who has, very limited vision, you don't want to have all of the feedback to that learner be you're smiling and nodding because she doesn't get that feedback, right? You have to match not only the input, but the feedback to the learner's sensory ability, motor ability, cognitive ability to support her gains in comprehension. So we're going to build a dictionary to support that comprehension development. We're going to use touch cues or object cues. And we're going to use that touch or object cue to communicate a certain meaning. And when that happens, the partner's going to do this and say this. And then what we expect from the learner. This is a column that didn't appear on the last dictionary because you can't directly observe comprehension, right? You can't directly observe understanding. We have to infer it. So the learner has to show us something, has to make some kind of sound, movement, gesture, something so that we as a partner can say, she got it. She understood what I did. She understood my cue. And that's why this last column on the far right is so critical to this dictionary. So here's an example. All right. If I'll give an example with a touch cue and an object cue, and you will have this whole thing. I don't need to read it with you. You guys can read. We're going to touch Susan's left upper arm, and you might say, does it matter? And I'm going to say, it does. Everybody's got to do the same thing the same way every time because these kids don't generalize. They don't have symbolic ability. We've got to be consistent. So I'm going to touch Susan's left upper arm through her clothing because she doesn't like to be touched on her bare arms. So if she's got short sleeves, I don't want to touch on her bare skin. I want to touch on her clothing. And it is going to be used to mean I'm here to do some work with you, right? So every time that an intervener, a para, a related service provider, a teacher is going to show up to do work with Susan, they're going to touch her upper left arm on her clothing. And this is what they're going to say and do. They're going to approach slowly, directly from the front, not from the side. Pause, provide that touch cue, and say, hi, Susan, time to do some work. Again, you can choose the words, but I'm trying to say keep it brief because remember, kids don't understand words. They don't understand signs. So you would sign, hi, Susan, time to work, right? And what you're going to watch for is that the learner's going to remain seated, or if the learner's standing, whatever that position is going to remain the same. But somehow you want that learner to orient to the partner, either to look at the partner or to turn her body to the partner or to do something to orient to the partner so that she's saying, yeah, I'm ready. I may not want to, but yeah, I'm ready. All right. With an object cue, we're going to use bubble wrap, an approximate 5-inch square bubble wrap. And when you offer Susan a piece of bubble wrap, it's going to be used to mean you can take a break. Time for a break. After you've done some work on a day, take a break. And what the partner's going to do and say, the partner's going to move all the task materials away from Susan. All right. And either say or sign, you've finished. You finished the work. You finished the eat. You finished the puzzle. You finished the whatever it is. Take a break. And what you expect Susan to do is to take that bubble wrap from the partner and maybe move in the direction of the beanbag chair because she loves the beanbag chair. So she's going to go sit in the beanbag chair. Maybe initially she's only going to take the bubble wrap. But you see, you've got to include in this column what the learner's going to do so you can say, she got it, message received. Okay? So you'll have this as an example. Process steps, I've outlined all of those for you. Again, you're going to select the symbol identifiers, which are object cues for key people. These are powerful. I used to have a bangle bracelet. I wish I would have brought it today. And when I was teaching gestures as part of a research project, every time I approached a learner, I would do hand under hand and put his hand on that bangle and say, hi, Lance, it's Susan. And what I tried to teach him to do was put his hand up so we would do a high five. And this is a learner I've known for a very long time. He now is 23 years old. I taught him this particular gesture when he was 4 and 5 years old. I've stayed in touch with his family even during my time in Carolina and now in Missouri. And I went to visit him for another project a couple years ago. Hadn't seen him for 8 years. 8 years hadn't seen him. And he's very limited cognitively. Now at 23, he reads on about a first grade level. But he does read, so yay, celebrate it, right? And I found that old bracelet. And I went up to him when the teacher said I asked permission because I was like, I feel really stalky observing him and not letting him know I'm here. I took his hand and put it on, and he walked around like kind of head down, eyes like, like a lot of our kids do. As soon as his hand hit that, he went, because that's what he had learned from me. That was my identifier. That was his identifier for me. And after not seeing me for 8 years, interacting with me for 8 years, he remembered. We need to match those features of these objects and to the learner's sensory skills and preferences. Again, if kids don't like super soft things, don't use soft textures, don't use soft touch. We're going to choose touch cues for each of the requests routinely made of the learner. Target them to the parts of the body the learner can move. Assign a unique meaning and fill out the rest of the columns. Again, stressing to all the partners the importance of everybody providing the cues consistently every single time you're going to sit down with Susan to work and every single time you're going to give her a break. So once again, you're going to say to me, Donna, we're going to get ready for the next poll, please, as soon as I say this statement. So we've got a team of several people, and you might say on this team of 4 people who are going to be building an augmented input dictionary for a learner. One individual can remember 3 of the cues, object and touch cues. One individual can remember 5. One individual can remember 6. And one individual can remember 8. How many cues should be included on the first augmented dictionary that you're going to be providing? 3, 4, 5, or 8 cues? I'm getting excited. That's a preview. We'll give it about 5 more seconds. Okay, we're a little over 50%, and I'm really, really, really excited that 72% of you who did respond said you provide 3 cues on the first dictionary, because again, it's the lowest number that any individual team member can remember. And I put 4 in there as a trick. So some of you, sorry, you fell for my trick. It's not the number of team members. It's the number of cues that individual team members can remember. And if you look at this prompt, 3, 5, 6, and 8. Yes, 12% of people said 8 cues. Hopefully we want to get to 8, right? We want to get to 8. But if everybody can only remember 3, we got to start with 3, because everybody's got to do the same thing, the same way, the same time, every time. All right? Why? Because repeatedly pairing touch cues and object cues with speech or sign, I should have typed that, I apologize, over time can facilitate understanding. And this provides support for communication development. All right? The key. By enhancing meaning and facilitating retention or comprehension, by pairing verbal input with alternative modes, including sign, textures, objects, touch. We have to talk with more than our mouths, or with learners who sign with more than our hands. All communication should be multimodal. It just has to be that way. So with only 4 minutes left, Donna, what questions do you have for me? If there are questions, we'll take those. Maybe we could launch the poll and people could answer the final poll while I'm answering questions. Does that sound reasonable?
I think that sounds terrific. I'm going to go ahead and put the last poll up, and Susan is asking that you put your responses in the chat. Let's see, there you go.
Okay. It's what specific action step might you take? So you have to type to build some expressive and receptive dictionaries for a learner. And you please, 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 if you don't buy anything else that I've said today, and that's okay, please know that if you're going to build these dictionaries for a learner who doesn't use symbols, you need to build two. One for expression, one for reception. Do you have some questions for me? Donna?
I am looking at the chat. I think everyone go ahead and write in the chat. You're not choosing anything here. You're going to put in the chat what the specific action steps might be to create that non-symbolic dictionary. And for me, Susan, I think I would start with a great team that includes the family and school. And we would be maybe taking some videos or taking some information, collecting information, and then coming up with our best plan there.
Yeah, I love it, Donna. It's gotta include the family. And even if not every single member of the family is on board, if you can get one person on board that's going to use those signals and interpret those signals the same way at home and provide the touch and object cues the same way at home, it's going to make a difference.
For sure. So Patty said in here, you just answered my question on how many dictionaries you can use with a learner. Thank you. And Vicki says, I'm going to use my ears and my eyes and my heart to read signals. And then Jackie says, we've all been excited about the potential for creating video diary so that we can teach others, including peers.
May I comment on that, Donna, before you go on?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's critical. It's another one of those things that you guys are keeping me honest. And Missy, I warned you, the later it gets, the faster I talk, because I just get too excited and I need to shut up sometimes. When we first did the first gesture study, we didn't have the potential with cell phones and cell phone video that we have now. And we used to burn CDs at the end of the study. We burned CDs with all these gestures that we used and the object cues and touch cues that we used. And we gave them to the families of all the participants in the study. And they cried. They literally cried, every single family, because it was like, I didn't know my kid was communicating. And now with cell phone videos, oh man, shoot a 2 to 3 second, 4 second video. These things go fast, right? And you share that with the team and you share it with the family to go, this is what it looks like. This is what we're talking about. So yes, 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 yes. And I don't remember the name of the person who wrote that, but yes, thank you. That's so important.
All right, so there's a few more here. Just says teaching touch cues, signing for children who are deafblind. Yes, and making a digital online dictionary system that might even include photos or small video clips, just like you said.
Ding, ding.
And I think this is Marilyn speaking. I think one of the greatest part about all of this is where a lot of our team meetings that we're doing across our states are helping all the providers and families and everybody coming together and coming to an agreement on that is actually communication, or what is that symbol mean? So we can really go off of this even so many more directions. This is fantastic. Susan, we truly appreciate your time, your energy, your fantastic information right here that we know you can give a full day on this, a whole weekend on this topic. So we thank you with a little just like, hey, we may have to reach out for you for something in the future. Please. But we truly thank you so much for your time. And we thank the interpreters for being here. And we thank everybody else for being here. And again, thank you to all of our Southeast deafblind states for supporting this awesome Southeast webinars. Please take the time to finish this poll up here. And know that this content, this information, and Susan's contact information will be coming to your email address very soon. Again, thank you so much for doing this. This is a topic that needs to be shared time and time again. Again, thank you everybody for your time. Please take a moment to finish these 4 last questions up here. This will help us to ensure that we have been on track with all of these great topics that have been shared to you.
Thank you. And I'm really good. People tell me about responding to email. You just need to give me some time, but you have my phone and you have my email. Contact me if you have questions. Thank you, Marilyn, Donna, Robert, Dana. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate you so much. It was awesome. I'm already thinking of, I have to do a presentation on communication to some early childhood folks. And I think a lot of what you're talking about here is going to be so appropriate for them.